I'm standing in my study in England, holding a document that's about to make history, and it's giving me major anxiety. The Act of Toleration that I'm about to send to Maryland is supposed to solve our religious freedom problem, but I'm low-key worried that it might create even bigger ones. My name is Cecil Calvert, 2nd Lord Baltimore, and this is the AP U.S. History My Story podcast. In 1600s England, it was all about the Protestants. King Henry VIII couldn't get a divorce in the previous century and handed this religious mess. Catholics like me couldn't hold public office or go to university, and we were constantly getting fined or thrown in prison for just existing. That's why my father, the 1st Lord Baltimore, got this brilliant idea to establish a colony where Catholics could practice their religion without getting harassed 24/7. So, after a failed colony in Newfoundland because it was too cold, my father was working towards a second charter in land much further south called Maryland. And then he died in 1632, 5 weeks before the charter was granted. So guess what? At 26 years old, I inherited not just a title and some land, but this massive responsibility to make his vision work. No pressure, right? Maryland was supposed to be our sanctuary, our safe space, our little corner of America where we could just be Catholic in peace. At first, it was working perfectly. It had Catholic leadership, Catholic settlers, Catholic everything. I was literally turning my father's dream into reality. If I failed, I'd be letting down not just the Catholic settlers who depended on me, but also my father's memory. Talk about family expectations. But then word got out and the frigging Protestants started showing up. A lot of Protestants, like way more Protestants than Catholics. By 1649, we're talking about a colony that's maybe 60% Protestant, 40% Catholic, and everyone's giving each other the side eye during Sunday services. The Protestants then began pushing back against our Catholic leadership. So I drafted this Act of Toleration. And honestly, it was pretty revolutionary for its time. The basic idea was that any Christian, Catholic or Protestant, could worship freely in Maryland without getting persecuted. No fines, no prison, no harassment, just straight up religious freedom. And for a while, it actually worked. Immigrants started flooding in from all over Europe. German Protestants, Irish Catholics, English Puritans who were tired of Puritan communities being so intense. Everyone wanted a piece of that religious freedom action. But here's where it gets complicated and low-key problematic by today's standards. The act also said that anyone who denied the divinity of Jesus, so basically Jews, Muslims, atheists, anyone who wasn't a Christian, could literally be put to death. That part was absolutely not giving tolerance vibes, and it shows how limited even progressive thinking back then would be completely unacceptable today. So let's talk about how environmental and other factors were shaping colonial development. The Chesapeake Bay region where we established Maryland was absolutely perfect for tobacco cultivation. The climate, the soil, the access to water transportation, everything lined up to make tobacco farming incredibly profitable. This created unique social dynamics where economic cooperation became more important than religious differences. Capitalism was trumping religious conflict, which was pretty advanced thinking for the 1640s. But here's what's really important to understand. Every colony was basically an experiment in how to organize society. There was no playbook for how to build successful communities in the New World, so each colony tried different approaches and learned from the results. New England colonies like Massachusetts focused on religious unity and community cooperation, very stable, orderly communities, but zero tolerance for religious diversity. While Virginia and the other Chesapeake colonies focused primarily on economic opportunity, more tolerant of religious differences, but relied heavily on the plantation system, indentured servants, which turned into enslaved Africans. Maryland was trying to thread the needle between these approaches. Economic opportunity like Virginia, but with explicit religious protections that went beyond what anyone else was offering. My act of toleration was me saying we can have the best of both worlds, economic prosperity and religious freedom. The idea that people of different religious backgrounds could coexist peacefully in the same political community became one of the foundational principles of American democracy. You'll hear from folks like James Madison in episode 3.9, who drafted the Bill of Rights, partly based on lessons learned from colonies like Maryland. The Act of Toleration lasted until 1692, when Protestant revolutionaries in Maryland basically said, "Thanks for the tolerance, but we're taking over now," and repealed it. But the idea that government could protect religious diversity survived even when that specific law didn't. Looking back, our definition of freedom was way too narrow by today's standards, but I'm still proud of what we did in Maryland to expand religious freedom. Sometimes progress happens, one imperfect step at a time. Like, follow, and share the AP US History My Story podcast, because these stories hit different when you hear the original voices that shaped our country.